Welcome back to the Mackem in the Middle podcast. This time, a game in the FA Cup away to Fulham, a 1-1 draw, which does mean there will be a replay, and I presume that will be not this week, but the week after midweek, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong on that one, but of course that will be the date for that rearranged game. Sunderland took the lead through Jack Clarke before Tom Kearney got a second half equaliser to make it 1-1. A boring game, if you look at the scoreline, but there's a lot to talk about, and unfortunately, the main talking point is probably not a good one. And I'm sure everyone knows where that is going. But first and foremost, Michael, it was a game that going into Sunderland, without a doubt, the underdogs, most people kind of believed ahead that would lose the game. And I think that would have been fair enough because Fulham are flying in the Premier League at the moment. If you saw the team that they put out, yeah, there was a few changes. I think they made 7 changes from their last Premier League game, but they've still got some very good players in there, the likes of Tom Kearney. Obviously he got the goal. He's one of the best players to have played in the Championship in recent years, and he doesn't get in Fulham's team at the moment, which shows their strength in depth in the Premier League. And of course Sunderland put out pretty much a full starting 11. Ekwa named on the bench as well, and obviously he came on for his debut. But we'll get on to the performance, and Sunderland probably come away from that game a little bit disappointed not to have won the game.
Certainly the case. And in the pub I was in watching it, I went mental for Chris Riggs' winner, only to find out it was disallowed. So
I think we all did.
That's how much of an idiot I ended up looking in front of everybody. But there you go. We'll not talk about that. The performance on the whole, it was a game we were expected to get beat. Fulham were obviously 6th, 7th, somewhere like that. They're in the top. They're certainly at least in the top 10 in the Premier League, maybe in the top 7. I watched them play Chelsea the other week, and they were pretty good value for the victory. And they're not a bad team. They really aren't a bad team. I did think, though, that maybe people might underestimate the quality that we do have. And I think at times yesterday, what impressed me the most about the performance was that we didn't just go there to sit back. We went there to have a go and to make it hard for Fulham. And I think, it took, if you look at it on the surface, it took a really good individual goal from Tom Kearney to get a replay. Obviously, we know the big talking point of Ross Stewart, which I'm sure you'll get onto, so I won't mention it here. But in general, I think that performance was one to be very proud of. I think we were competing for every ball. We defended very, very manfully. And defending is not something I've usually associated with this team under Tony Mowbray. And that's not a criticism, because that's, at the end of the day, we have done really well. But I'm just someone who likes us to keep clean sheets. But at the end of the day, we were going to have to ride our luck. We did. Fulham are not a bad side. And I think just to have come away not losing, I think a replay we really could have done without. But at the same time, the performance definitely deserved a replay. I think it would have been very harsh on us if we got beat. And I think the lads, every one of them, can hold their heads high after yesterday, because they really did deserve all the praise they got.
Tongue twister there.
Definitely, yes, it is. Don't try it.
And I suppose the one thing that neither side really wanted out of this one, Dylan, is a replay, but that is what it's going to be.
Yeah, no, exactly. Obviously, championship seasons have got a lot of games anyway. So having extra games like this isn't ideal. But then again, another opportunity to play another game against the Premier League side, can only help the squad. Big problem with the replay is, as it stands, we don't actually have a striker who's eligible to play in that game. Obviously, with Gell being cup tied and Stewart being injured. But it's certainly not ideal, especially with the track record we've had this season with sort of injuries. It's not great to have to then play an extra game. However, obviously, as Michael was just saying there, we really took the game to them yesterday. There's no reason why we shouldn't try and do that on the replay. So I certainly wouldn't want to see the sort of weaker side, because we went to their house and we give them a really good game. There's no reason why we shouldn't be able to give them as good a game, if not better, when they come to us and hopefully get a bit further on in the cup.
Yeah. Before we get on the game, might as well get on to it. Obviously, Ross Stewart went off injured, Michael. He went down. People said hamstring. At the time, you think one of them injuries, he might miss a couple of weeks, bit of precautionary. It isn't his hamstring, it is Achilles, which is probably one of top 2, top 3 worst injuries you can get in football. And when you look at players that have had it in the past, in terms of how long it takes to recover, like I say, this is just pure speculation and not really knowing anything about it at the moment, because I don't even think the scans have been done and nothing's been said about it. But a kind of educated guess would tell you that at the very least, Ross Stewart won't play again this season, and there's a good chance he won't play again this year. It'll probably be about next January we see him at the earliest, depending on how severe the injury is. And I posted it on Twitter at the time it happened. You got people who straight rush to social media and go for the throat of Mowbray or Speakman and be like, oh, it's a cup game, we're not going to win. Why are you playing your best player? But it is such a, I suppose, easy excuse to make when a player gets injured, because if nothing gets injured, you win the game. Everyone's like, oh, what a good decision it was to play Ross Stewart. He's just scored the winner, we're through to the next round, etc., etc. And had it been the same injury that he'd picked up, towards the start of the season, maybe people have a little bit of a point there that, he's played too much football recently. But this is a completely different injury. It's completely unrelated. It's a freak injury that could have happened whenever. And like I said on Twitter, you can't just not play your players in a game on the off chance to get an injury.
No, you can. I mean, I certainly had that view at the start when I saw the team, but at the end of the day, we didn't have another forward to play, and a lack of options meant we did have to play Ross Stewart. But I think as well, he'd have wanted to play. I think it might have been you who said this on Twitter as well. He wanted to play. He would have undoubtedly wanted to play this game, and I don't think he would have reacted very well to being stuck on the bench. I mean, he was on the bench at Shrewsbury, if I'm right. He had to come off the bench, but I mean, it's one of those where that sort of injury can just happen. And it's unfortunate for Ross Stewart that, and I agree with you, unfortunately, that means I'll be very surprised if we see him again this season. As you said yourself, maybe this year, it depends what the extent of the injury is. But again, even with him going off injured and coming back from injury, when it eventually happens, he's got to get up to fitness. He probably won't be up for fitness for quite a while. You saw Niall Huggins as an example, who was out for nearly a year and has only had sporadic first team appearances here and there because he probably won't be ready for it. So that's the one big negative. It is a massive shame, but it just means now that the club are going to have to really push hard to try and get at least one forward, maybe two, but we'll wait and see what happens in the remaining days of the window. But yeah, I'm gutted for Ross Stewart. Massive shame.
Yeah. And we'll probably talk about this a bit further in a podcast that we do at some point later, which could be out today or Monday. I'm not entirely sure when it'll go out, but we needed a striker, Dylan. A week ago, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, we needed a striker. Sims went. We needed two strikers. Ross Stewart's obviously now injured. Obviously, Joe Gelhardt came in, and he is a striker and he can play there and he'll probably do a good job and score some goals. But he's kind of a utility forward more than anything else. But now that Ross Stewart's out, and like I say, will almost definitely at the minimum be out for the season. We're now back in a position where we need to sign two strikers, one of which is as close to Ross Stewart as you can get, which, on the 29th of January, as we're recording, you've got 2 days to find them. It's probably going to be the hardest period the recruitment team have had.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, as you say in there, to be able to replace a player like Ross Stewart in the championship level it's pretty much an impossible task, especially obviously with such short notice. I mean, I'm sure they've had sort of contingency plans going on in the background, and they'll have a list of targets prepared. But I mean, obviously they've made no secret of the fact they're quite keen to get Sims back. I mean, there's been not much movement there. Obviously, he's been kept around at Everton until they can either bring someone in, or if Sean Dyche decides he fancies him. So I don't know what we're going to see in that regard. Obviously, according to the report, we've just missed out on Nemeth, who's a bit of a bigger, bulkier striker who's gone to Hamburg. So that's unfortunate. But I mean, it does put us in quite an awkward position, because obviously any club who we're going to go to now to try and sign a striker on a permanent is going to save the situation we're in and just knock the price up, because they know we're going to be absolutely desperate. But then you can't sort of turn that on its head and just bring a loan in, because then in a few months' time, when we hit the end of the season, we have no strikers at the club who are fit. So I mean, it's a really tough position. I don't envy them at all, but they've sort of had a track record past year and a half of getting the right bodies through the door. So I do have faith in them, but it's certainly going to be a difficult one.
Yeah, and like I said, we'll talk quite more about that in depth in a different podcast at some point. But on to the game, Michael. First kind of 20 minutes of the game, Sunderland, I don't think anyone really knew how Sunderland were playing, how they'd come out. And yeah, Fulham dominated possession for the majority of it, and I think that's kind of to be expected. But the first 20 minutes, the performance was very good, and it was only 6 minutes in when Sunderland took the lead, and I think it was Issa Diop who, every time I watch him, seems to make a mistake. Luckily, he did again. Jack Clark gets the ball off him, he races into the box, and a little bit of hesitation, I think, whether he was going to pass to Stewart or whether he was going to take a shot. But he has took the shot. He's put it past Rodak and went 1-0 up. And a very good start to a very good performance.
The pressing for it was, I mean, that's one of the things that was good all afternoon, was that the pressing at end periods of the game was fantastic. And never has that been more the case than for the goal, where, as you said, Issa Diop basically keeps hold of the ball. He lingers onto it a little bit too long, probably thinks that he's got more time than he has. And then Jack Clark was just straight in like the flash, just going right in. And then it gives them the chance to go right through on goal. Very, very, very composed finish as well, because as you said, I mean, Jack Clark's not exactly been known for best for his finishing, has he? So, but it's a good goal, good finish, good pressing. And it was one that just showed, again, it just symbolised for me our intent to not just sit back, but to actually give Fulham a game. And we've got the players to give them a game. And I think Jack Clark proved it. So best possible start. Obviously, as you said, Fulham dominated the ball and did for the majority of the game. But again, we expected to go there and to have to sit in and not really have much of the ball. And that will probably be the case again at the Stadium of Light when we play them again. So, but yeah, I mean, can't complain. Good finish from Jack Clark, and hopefully that'll get his confidence up a little bit more.
Yeah. And throughout the first half, like I said, Fulham had a lot of the possession and, like I said, to be expected. But Sunderland defended well for large parts. They got the ball, and when they did, they went forward with it, Dylan. And I said at half-time, or just before half-time, Sunderland could have been out of sight by then.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we had a plethora of chances, mainly coming from the likes of obviously Ahmad, who's always going to be trying to get shots in, trying to get the ball forward as much as possible. And I wouldn't necessarily say it was poor finishing. I just think it was just we had some unfortunate moments where we had some near misses. But we definitely could have had more than one goal. I think there was one part where I can't remember exactly what part of the match it was, but I remember the ball came out, rolled out, and sort of Mishu and Ahmad both went for it, and then Ahmad hit it with his left and sort of got it just outside the far post. I think if Mishu calls for that and puts his foot through it, maybe he gets it in the net, but it's just unfortunate. However, I mean, we've gone one nil up against the Premier League team, and we've kept in the game the entire way through. I mean, you can't ask for much more than that. Obviously, a couple more goals would have been nice, but they certainly give it a good go in that regard.
Yeah, and like I said, the chances that Sunderland especially had in the first half, Michael, you think, second half, Fulham probably sharpen up a little bit. Sunderland will see even less of the ball. There'll be less chances to counter, less chances to get a shot on goal. But that wasn't really the case at all. The second half performance was very much similar to the first, but again, just lacking that kind of cutting edge in the final third. And we'll get on to the kind of last 10 minutes of the game, really, where there seemed to be about a chance after chance after chance for both teams. But for the majority of the second half, Sunderland could have scored another 2 or 3.
We could have done. We had the chances to certainly do so. I mean, I think what was it? There was a chance where I think Amad Diallo shoots at the keeper, spills it, and then slightly spills it, and then Jack Clark, if he'd just been a second quicker, could probably have gone and scored. I think there was another one where Pierre Ekwa had a chance where, okay, granted, it's a bit of a harder one because the ball's coming at him quite quickly, but there were chances in the game. One particular combination I want to touch upon is, and it's something that I noticed last week against Middlesbrough, and I don't know whether you two agree on this. Amad Diallo and Patrick Roberts, in particular, I thought were two of our best out-attacking players because the understanding that they both had was just impeccable. They kept on having nice interchanges. They anticipated each other's moves very well. And I actually genuinely think Fulham struggled to contain both of them. So it just goes to show the quality we have in the team. And again, like you said, we did create the opportunities. It's just a question of whether Ross Stewart had been on the pitch, unfortunately, whether we would have needed to be held to a replay. But it is what it is. At least we were creating the chances.
Yeah. The one downside from the second half, Dylan, is obviously the equaliser that Fulham got. And like I said, Tom Kearney, very good player who's, not really getting a sniff in the Fulham team this season in the Premier League. But he started in midfield and, he did what he did in the Championship for multiple seasons. He gets the ball, he can go past players and he can score goals, and that's exactly what he did. The only downside from a Sunderland point of view would be the space and the kind of, I just want to say, kind of lack of composure defensively because, I think Michu came in first. He went sliding. Kearney's cut it back a little bit. He's cut it back again. Another defenders went sliding. And it's a good goal, not to take too much away from it, but it's definitely one that Sunderland could have defended a little bit better.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, obviously it was a really well worked goal from Kenny. His footwork was brilliant. Obviously, to send all of our defenders the absolute shops. But as I said, maybe just have a bit of a calmer head, just assess the situation. Maybe just get a foot in instead of going flying in for the tackles. But I mean, as you said there, Tom Kenny's been one of the best players in the Championship in recent years. He's used to just like doing that to Championship defences. So I imagine we probably used all of our defensive luck for the afternoon with that block that Ballard did. So I wasn't too upset about it, but yeah, it would have been ideal if we could have kept that out, because I mean they hadn't really had much of a snip up until that point. I think that was when they started getting a bit more confident up until that last 10 minutes when we were all over them again. But yeah, no, it's sort of one of them ones. Just have to just draw a line under it and get on with the rest of the game like we did. It didn't really affect us, which I was glad to see.
Yeah. And obviously, Sunderland, as expected, made quite a few changes throughout the game. Obviously, the first one was very early in the game. Ross Stewart, replaced by Abdullah Bar, Jefferson Bennett, Chris Rigg, Niall Huggins, and Pierre Ekwa all came on. Obviously, Ekwa for his debut, and we'll touch on him slightly before the end. But like Dylan alluded to there, Michael, the kind of last 10, 15 minutes of the game, probably the most hectic I've ever seen a game be which was obviously in a competition that people don't necessarily care too much about. And it's not often you see, such an end-to-end game between two, very attacking teams. But that's exactly what it was last 10 minutes. Fulham had a couple of chances. Anthony Patterson with, 2 or 3 double saves, some very good saves outside of that. And Rodak obviously had to make a couple, but there's obviously one moment in the last few minutes which stands out more than any other, and kind of spoke about it before we went on to record this, is the winner that was not a winner from Chris Rigg. And we call for VR to be in the Championship, but God, I wish it wasn't.
Yeah, well, I mean, unfortunately, it was the correct decision for it to be disallowed, because I think it was Bar. It was either Bar or Lester.
Yeah.
I think it was Bar game. Bar was clearly offside in the build-up to the goal, but it was, yeah, it's one of those instances where you just wish that they just made the mistake. Seeing as how we see crap referees in the Championship, can we not have just had that one there and just have that decision go in our favour? Yeah, I mean, I was saying to you two, obviously, before we recorded, that in the pub I was watching it in, me and my mate went utterly ballistic when we took the lead, when we thought we'd won it in stoppage time, and then obviously we saw that Chris Rigg looked disappointed. I was like, neck off, it hasn't been disallowed. But of course it had been. So I mean, it was the correct call. But I mean, you're right, as for the end of the game, it was just two teams that just didn't seem to want a replay. They just looked like they were trying to go all out to make sure that they ended up winning the game. And to be fair, on the game as a whole, it's probably, especially even though I'm someone who prides in keeping clean sheets and being solid defensively, it's actually probably been, it was a very enjoyable game actually to watch, because it was both teams that, because there was no league points at stake, you thought, right, let's go for it. We've got nothing to lose. Yeah. And the main thing I take away from it, despite how annoying that decision was at the end, that we did manage to compete and hold our own against a very good Fulham side, irrespective of the changes that they made.
Yeah. And obviously it was disallowed, Dylan, offside. And, I think few people had some, suspicions that it was offside when it actually went in, because I think Abdullah Bar obviously made the run a little bit early, and he probably a little bit disappointed not to have, held his line there, because he is looking right across at the defender, and he's about 3 yards offside, I think. But, when that ball goes into Chris Rigg, he puts it in the back of the net. I thought he'd missed, but I think, does it hit the bar and go in? I think it did.
I think it did, yeah.
I think so. But what a story that would have been. He's 15. I think he would have been the youngest goal scorer in FA Cup history, I think the commentator said. And, he's so highly rated, the best in the country for his age group. Let's talk about whether he's going to stay, whether he's going to go. And, I don't think there's too much in it, because it's probably just because he's a Sunderland player, but you should unfollow the likes of Newcastle and whatnot on Instagram. He is a player that, if we can keep hold of him, although he's 15, he will be in the first team in the next year.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, obviously the goal got disallowed, but at the end of the day, he's walked off that. It wasn't him who was offside, if you know what I mean. So he's walked off that pitch knowing that he's 15 years old. He's had the ball come in, he's stuck it in the back of the net in an FA Cup game against a Premier League team. Obviously, the goal hasn't stood, which is unfortunate. I mean, the confidence that must give him, he's going to be looking the absolute boyo when he rocks into school on Monday. Do you know what I mean? But Yeah, it's like, I mean, obviously Mowbray said after the match, like, I'm not playing him just as a sort of stunt because he's so young. He's trained with the first team, and he's getting these chances because of how good he is. And I mean, he's sort of like he's proven his point. Obviously, he came on the last 10 minutes against Shrewsbury when we were 1-0 down. We've ended up scoring 2 goals, and then he's put the ball in the net against these. I mean, you can quite clearly see that he is a really talented young player.
And I think the one thing that a few people mentioned, and I think I put it in the group chat as well, is the fact that when he came on the pitch, the first touch of the ball that he had, granted, it went out of play. It wasn't the best pass in the world, but he's tried a 30-yard switch over to Abdullah Bar at 15 years old in a 1-1 away to Fulham, last few minutes of a game, and he's trying passes like that at 15, and it would be so easy for someone like that. Even if someone like Ekwa, who's 5 years older than him, had come on the pitch, and the confidence might not be there, the kind of reluctance to try something a little bit too far, and make a bad pass. But to be 15, come on the pitch at that time against that type of team and have the confidence to go and do things like that shows how good of a player he can be.
Definitely.
Yeah, no, definitely. Go on, Michael.
Go on. No, it's good. I was just basically agreeing with you. Just saying that it just shows the fearless mentality, and that shows what a lot of our squad actually has because of how young it is. Sorry, Dylan, go on. I'll let you finish.
No, sorry. All I was going to say was it's always good to see really young players coming and sort of putting their mark in first team games. It's almost just with all the talk that's been going on recently with obviously is he going to stay, is he going to go. It's almost unfortunate that he's so good at this age because obviously he's at an age where we can't really get him tied down. So it's just about sort of stopping his head getting turned, keeping him sort of wanting to be here until we can get him tied down on professional terms. So we'll hopefully keep giving him these chances, but if he keeps playing well, we might end up getting him poached off us. Like,
yeah, that is always a risk. But we'll move on to the next segment, which I'm sure Dylan will know from all the podcasts he's listened to, the non-player ratings bit. But Michael will go with his 3 standout players first. Your third, second, and first standout player from the game, Michael.
Right, okay. I'm just trying to think. It's a similar fashion for me because I get 2 of them figured out, and I'm trying to think of the other one. Okay, right. I would say, right. Third, I'll go Anthony Patterson.
Yeah.
The saves that he made, which some of the saves he made were really, really top draw saves, and ended up making some crucial ones at crucial times. This is the other one because I was thinking of putting Dan Ballard in this. I thought Dan Ballard was superb as well. Okay, second, I will go with Dan Ballard. I think Dan Ballard was just an absolute rock at the back, and I think a special mention for that goal line clearance that he made at 1-0. Well, I think it was Andres Pereira had the shot that I think was straight at Patterson, but it comes off Dan Ballard because he had the anticipation to realise where the ball was going to go. But Dan Ballard, I think, all afternoon just dealt with Fulham's attack very well, and I thought dealt with Mitrovic quite well when he came on. And obviously, we all know a certain section of a certain fan base would have been all over it if Mitrovic had scored against us. Hopefully, he doesn't do that in the replay. But yeah, Ballard second. I think for me, top one for me was probably Patrick Roberts. I thought Patrick Roberts was outstanding. I think a factor of it might be that he was playing against his old side and was really determined to show them what they'd missed. I know they sold him to Man City, so obviously that's understandable. But yeah, I think Patrick Roberts, and a special mention, I've got to go for Amad Diallo because, again, like I said earlier, both of them had such great link-up play and understood each other so well that Fulham struggled against them. Middlesbrough last week struggled against them. So I'd say Patterson third, Ballard second, and Roberts first. But you could literally put Amad Diallo in there. You could put Daniel in there. You could put a host of players in there.
Yeah. Obviously, Edouard Michu started again. He didn't start. Did he start? He did start, yeah. Obviously, in place of Corey Evans, he was excellent again. And, I don't think too many people talked about it at the time, but that pass through to Jack Clark was quite incredible in the second half. And he did stop a little bit there, Jack Clark, and we did lose the ball, so nothing came of it. But top 3 standout players for you, Dylan, starting with your third.
It's pretty similar to what Michael's got. Is just one difference. I'll put Patterson in third as well. I thought he was excellent. I mean, some of the saves he made. I mean, we could have easily, as well as we played, easily walked away from that game with a loss if it weren't for some of the saves he made. The only reason Ballard's not going in there for me is because of, as much as the block he made was absolutely unbelievable, it then did go in and off Patterson. So I'm going to put Patterson in my list ahead of Ballard, and then as you in there. I thought Mishu was excellent. He's really growing into the side, so he's going to go second for me. I mean, obviously we've got this $5 million option to buy end of the season, and he is going to really need to be featuring really heavily and playing really well to sort of justify us paying that if we do decide to come the end of the season. But I'm liking what I'm seeing from him. I mean, his first few appearances, I thought he was always quick to do things, but almost a bit too quick. Like he tried to hit a quick free kick, would lose the ball, things like that. I think he's getting a bit more composed, and he's really sort of made his mark now. So I'm going to put him second for me. And then I completely agree about Patrick Robertson first. I thought he was absolutely outstanding. He was always trying to take his man on. He was probably unfortunate not to score because, I mean, you could tell there was points when he could have passed. He was taking the shot. You could tell he was absolutely gagging to put the ball in the net. And it was sort of unfortunate that he didn't. But yeah, I thought he was absolutely outstanding. And that's just what we're getting used to seeing week in, week out from Patrick Roberts.
It is. Hopefully, that type of performance carries on to Saturday's game, which is away to Millwall, if I'm not mistaken. I thought it was at home originally, but I think it is away, isn't it?
Yeah, we beat them 3-0 in December. So, yeah.
It is. Away from home against Millwall, another team that will be trying to get into the playoffs come the end of the year, come the end of the season. It's not going to be an easy game, and again, without the likes of Ross Stewart, you like to think we'll have a couple of strikers to go into that game with. You've got just under a week at the time of recording to make sure that players are up to speed. You've got the likes of Isaac Lahaji, who I still don't think speaks a word of English, but in our French-speaking squad, I don't think that's too much of a worry. I'm sure Tony Mowbray is taking his French lessons as we speak. Joe Gelhardt, obviously, he was cup-tied for that game against Fulham, but I think he could have played in terms of when he got registered. But like I say, he's cup-tied, so he couldn't play in the FA Cup anyway, and obviously won't be eligible for the replay either, but he'll be fit and ready to play against Millwall. But like I say, Michael, it's going to be a tough game. Predictions for it just before we wrap it up.
I wouldn't be really pessimistic side of me head saying get beat 1-0, but I think for me, I would take a point in this game. I think Millwall is one of the hardest places you could actually go in this division. I don't think many teams have gone there and got a victory. I'll go 1-1. I think if we get a point, then I wouldn't complain too much.
Yeah, that's fair. Dylan, predictions for Millwall Sunderland?
To be honest, I don't see why we can't go there and get 3 points. Like I always like to be quite optimistic, but I mean, when you look at the sort of the better quality players in their team, you've got Zian Fleming there. As long as you can keep him quiet, because he's always going to be the main man. And obviously they've had some trouble bringing in a striker. I know they were trying to get Kevin Nisbet, haven't managed to get him. So maybe their sort of forward line's not in the state they want it to be ideally at this moment in time. So, and I mean, most of our best defenders are all back fit now. So I think if we just keep it tight in the back and maybe just play sort of on the counter like we were against Fulham with what we were with 3 points. Obviously we'll need Gelhardt to hit the ground running because Stewart's not going to be playing. There's no reason why we can't win. I'm going to say 2-0.
Yeah. Obviously, Kevin Nisbet's a name that's been incredibly loosely linked with Sunderland through the board online. So probably not too much in that one. But obviously, like I said, that is next Saturday, that game. So we'll have something out to talk about that game on the Sunday. We'll have another podcast out between now and then to talk about, transfers, the Ross Stewart situation and the contract situation with him that's ongoing and probably becomes a much harder decision to make now with the injury that he did pick up. And of course, if anyone does come in between now and then, big mention out to them as well and talk about what they will offer to the team. But like I say, next Sunday, we'll be back to talk about all of the Millwall game and everything that happened in that. But until then, we will see you later.
That's all, folks.